This is the Selected Podcast, your backstage pass and exclusive access to some of the biggest names in the tech industry. Brought to you by Sesamers, the definitive name in tech event media.
Hi there, this is Ben from Sesamers, recording live at Slush 2025 in Helsinki. Today I'm meeting with Brunicki, co-founder and general partner at Backed VC. Just closed their third fund at 100 million last week and are hosting 6 events here at Slush for 2,000 guests. Hi Alex, welcome to the pod.
Hi there, thank you for having me.
So you founded Backed in 2016 with Andre Dehez, with the vision of operating at the intersection of venture capital and events, and frontier tech more specifically. What made you think the VC industry needed more parties?
So I think Slush is probably the only event where we host a major party like this. It's a ton of fun, and I'm very, very happy that we do it. I think the thesis really came from the intersection of the benefits of human capital and human relationships and how events allow you to build that, but also a deeper thought and a deeper thesis around how to build edge in venture. And so our events really are a mechanism for us to do venture better. They allow us to source deals earlier, meet founders earlier, maybe make better decisions. And we hope that it actually over time increases the ecosystem value of which we are fundamentally a part of.
You started quite early in terms of age.
Mm-hmm.
How old were you when you started?
We were 27.
And you raised the first fund was 30 million?
It was initially 30 million, and then we grew it to 50 million over time. So the first close was around 30, and then we brought in some institutional LPs, and we closed a final close at 50.
We're not going to talk about this much, but just out of curiosity, when you did that 10 years ago, how did the industry reacted? I feel like you were super young compared to the traditional sort of investor.
Yeah, I think so. First thing, I don't think we could have done that today. I think it was part and parcel of the fact that back in 2015 the ecosystem was young, it was very early, there weren't that many funds. Everyone at the time told us that it was hyper competitive, you should never raise a VC fund, and there were probably 5 seed funds in London. Now there are, 1,000 in Europe, and so it would have been impossible today. I think people saw us as approaching venture in a refreshingly different way. I think our youth promised a sense of naivety around how you could do things differently. So we were really inspired around how US funds had created differentiation or created edge around certain things. A16Z did this around how they were, using engineers and sales teams internally to help their companies grow. Mm-hmm. They had an amazing content platform. First round had this idea around community. So we took some of those ideas and said, capital in Europe is very commoditized. How do we do this differently? And I think there was something that was fresh about the way we spoke about that. Now, it reminds me a little bit of getting on a tube in the morning in central London. When we came along and we were, 2 dudes from Oxford and we'd known each other for many years, people were hyper skeptical. And so it was a bit like trying to get on the tube in the morning and everyone's like, I don't want this person on the tube. And very quickly you become those people on the tube and you're looking at new entrants trying to get on the tube yourselves. And you're also skeptical of everyone new that comes along. So I think there was a lot of skepticism, and then we, I think, just ended up building deeper relationships and working closely with founders, and then the rest is history, I guess. So
let's talk about the performance. I was reading the announcements again. This is super new. You announced this third fund just last week. Fund 1 is top-quartile and just returned 35 capital to investors in October. You made 100 investments with 5 unicorns and 18 companies of 100 million valuation. So you're pretty good at spotting patterns and finding, great companies because you invest super early.
So far.
What are the patterns that we should know about?
So, I think people describe this differently at the fund. The way I would describe this is obvious founders and non-obvious markets. So when I think about obvious founders, I really think about individuals that have some very unique secret about their market. That might be they are demographically aligned with who they're serving. It might be that they've spent, from a scientific perspective, many, many years in a particular industry. We always look for founders that have something about their backstory that has made them deeply competitive and I think driven for outcomes that are not purely financial. So you often look for founders that might have had maybe a challenging upbringing. Mm-hmm. They might have played competitive sport that gives them that. And then beyond that, there's a magnetism, I think, around the most brilliant people. I don't think it's empathy. I don't think it's EQ. sometimes define that as PQ. So it's an ability to magnetize your early investors to want to invest in these crazy businesses before there's anything, and to magnetize the early employees that really should be joining OpenAI and Anthropic, but actually have chosen to join that business. So those are some of the things we look for there. Speed is another component that we look for in founders. Their ability to make decisions under uncertainty, their ability to move quickly, no sort of sunk costs in the way they operate. Sometimes because we're investing in frontier markets, there are a lot of academic founders that are slower, they're less sort of commercial, and so speed is very important. And then the non-obvious markets part, I think too many VCs talk about being contrarian the whole time. You have to be contrarian to have returns. I actually don't believe that. I think there are many VCs and many funds that are exceptional at seeing deals early and then winning those deals. And because venture is an access class more than anything, that is important. If you get into those deals, it's zero sum versus somebody else. But our biggest outcomes, I think, have come from betting on markets that are non-obvious. So when I look at businesses like Invisible, for example, it's a big company in our first fund. They are doing AI services. They are trying to build AI McKinsey or AI Accenture. When we backed them in 2017, that wasn't obvious. And we can talk a bit about that company in a bit. General Intuition is another example. So the founder was just on stage. When we backed Pim, he was building Instagram for gaming. And that wasn't an obvious market either. Like, why would anyone want to capture clips of themselves playing games? Well, obviously at the time, so many more people were living in digital worlds. They were meeting their friends in digital worlds. It wasn't just about them doing amazing things in games. It was actually capturing moments of them socializing in games. That business has now grown to become something which is much more focused on the applied AI side. They're building models around embodied AI. So how do you use all of the data from the games clips they have to train drones, to train robots? Because all of that data is relevant for how those machines might problem solve in a new environment. And so those were the non-obvious market bets that we've taken, and they've, I think, really characterized our first two funds.
So what you just described, correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't expect them to go in that route when you invested.
So that's true. So I think one of the things that VCs always pretend when they tell these stories is that the way a company turns out is always the way they predicted at the beginning.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we do as investors is we write a decision journal about every investment we make. Why did we make this bet? Mm-hmm. Why did we think this company was going to work out? And sometimes you might get 2 out of 5 right or 3 out of 5 right, but so many of our businesses ended up taking a circuitous route to where they are today. When we think about Invisible, they were building a company before AI was at the sort of pinnacle of what it can achieve today. So they were actually building a lot of things that Palantir and other AI process platforms are doing today with humans, with human labor around the world. And it just so happens that a lot of that can now be compressed with the exceptional models that exist. So it was the same idea, but actually the technology has taken that to a new level. And of course, Pim was building something very, very different. The thing that always stands out with these investments is that you're backing incredibly globally exceptional people that are able to reinvent themselves and reinvent their businesses when opportunities arise. So
the case of Invisible, I was checking it. So you backed them in 2018 when they were under 1 million in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're at 134 million in revenue. So they scaled to 134 with only X million seed capital before raising 100 million this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So incredible capital efficiency.
Yeah, it's really pretty good, and that's probably like the best performance of the fund one.
It's not the most highly valued company.
No, but
I think in terms of I think from capital in to revenue achieved, it's one of the most magnificent companies that we've seen.
Yeah, it's insane. Okay, coming back, and then I really want to talk about working with founders, but I have a perfect question. In the new fund, you have portfolio founders as LPs as well.
Mm-hmm.
How is it? I love that. I feel it's really amazing that you're able to bring in your own,
Yeah, we're thrilled about it. We're thrilled about it for a few reasons. I think first, it says something to the relationships we have with those people. I think what's unique about the fund, and I think what's unique about Seed, is that when you are backing founders when there is nothing really there, sometimes we're backing founders that are very young. So Pim didn't go to university. I think we backed him at 21. Parry, who's building Flow Engineering, we backed him straight out of Imperial. James DeCombe, who's building Comind, we backed him as a teenager. So when you're backing people that young and you see them develop, you do build relationships that are very close with these individuals. Venture is hard because you need to remain professional in those relationships, but you can't help but become close and friends. And so that is a part of this new fund that we're most proud of. A lot of those founders are investing in the fund. We've actually re-backed founders from Backed 1 as they're starting new businesses in Backed 3. I think the other component to it is it allows them an opportunity to feel even more involved in the fund. They have a reason why they may want to help our founders even more, because they're in some ways sort of financially more incentivized by that, because they want to see the fund do well. And then just from our side of things, it's incredibly motivating that people that you've worked with for 10, 12 years actually want to invest in the fund and to, create great returns for them.
Love it. You are focused on frontier tech only, let's say, right now. What does it mean? And does it mean that you're narrowing your focus?
So we've always been focused on 3 markets within frontier technology: financial services, manufacturing, and the biotech space. What we mean by frontier technology are companies that are operating at the intersection of engineering and conceptual breakthroughs. So their advantages come from operating on the frontiers of technology. There are many, many brilliant companies that are operating on the existing rails of technology as they exist, whereas a lot of our companies are pushing the boundaries of technology, and that's where they have their early forms of defensibility. And defensibility over the long term will come from many other factors, but initially it comes from a breakthrough engineering or conceptual innovation.
You plan to expand in the US, invest in more companies out there?
So our focus really is to invest in European founders, but where they build their companies, we don't mind. We want our founders to build their companies in places that give them the greatest opportunity to succeed. So in some of our companies like CoMind, Asker, which is an Alzheimer's business, a therapeutics company focused on Alzheimer's, they will build their teams in the UK because there is exceptional talent in the UK. There's also an arbitrage from a cost perspective, so engineering teams are going to be here. But Flow Engineering, the company that I just mentioned, which is building Figma for engineering systems, so their companies are Rivian, Astranis, a lot of West Coast manufacturing companies. The best place for them to build their company right now is on the West Coast of the US, but that is a British founder that we backed about 6 or 7 years ago. We do want to spend more time in the US. Why are we spending much more time in the US? Well, many of the rounds at seed that we're doing right now are with US funds. So the last 3 companies that we backed, Infinity, Parakeet, and Viscerality, they were all with West Coast funds. And so building stronger relationships with them, encouraging them to understand how we work and the value that we bring, mean that those rounds, which are hyper competitive, it increases our opportunity of working with those sorts of funds. And then long term, of course, having an office in the US allows us to support our founders much more effectively as well.
Does it mean one of you is going to go there? You're going to be hiring there?
TBD, we'll definitely have very senior presence in the US, and both Andre and I are open to the move.
Just from my own personal side of things, I know which of my co-founders is going to go to open the US market in 2027, but that's a different story. Coming back to this, concentration I was asking earlier, does it mean that you will invest in less companies?
Concentration in terms of industries, or concentration in terms of how many deals that we do?
How many deals, yeah.
So we've historically done what we call 25 core deals in each fund, 25 to 30. So these are deals where we're hitting an ownership stake that's meaningful for the fund. That's typically 10 to 15%.
Yeah.
We think that's the ownership stake that allows us to co-invest with great people. We often enjoy co-investing with one other fund. We hate party rounds, but we like one other fund on board because it provides, I think, an additional brain. But some of these technical businesses also require more firepower between seed and Series A. And we typically take board seats of those companies. But in Backed 1, Backed 2, and Backed 3, they will all have 25 to 30 core positions.
Got it. Makes sense. The majority of the audience of this podcast are founders. That's also why I thought it was interesting to meet with you. What is a backed founder versus just a founder?
So I think when we invest in any founder, they become a backed founder, obviously. That's the sort of level of support that we provide. As I said before, I think there is no platonic ideal of a founder. When I look across our portfolio, there are red threads that I think connect each founder. As I mentioned, I think they're all deeply competitive. I think they're all wired in such a way where they're not affected by the way the outside world thinks about things. Again, I think many of our best performing companies, they were doing things which typical logic should have said was impossible or isn't actually the way the world is going to work, and they made those markets happen. They built companies in those new markets. They're all founders that we think have very, very deep founder market fit. They're either exceptional scientists or they are, building for a particular customer segment that they understand because they are that customer segment. I think there are people that are strategic and commercial. We rarely back founders that are purely academic. They need to be complementary founding teams. And many of them are somewhat disagreeable. There's something about them that you see in some of their early actions, how quickly they fire their first employee, how challenging they are when you're fundraising with them. They don't accept everything that you say. They're not trying to placate you. They will push back on you and say, I fundamentally disagree with that, or I actually don't want you to be the partner in this business because you see the world differently. And I think those founders end up building bigger companies because they make these very, very challenging decisions more effectively.
We spoke a lot about successful, the best performing companies from the previous funds. How does it feel when a company you support is going through challenges or it's not performing so well?
I think it's very challenging because one of the benefits of venture, of course, is you have many companies in a portfolio. So one company underperforming doesn't feel existential. Of course, for a founder, when it's their sole mission, when a company is not performing well, you're all in, and that is existential. Again, when you've built, I think, relationships with founders, and you are someone that is somewhat empathetic, it is actually very, very challenging knowing that someone you care about is suffering in some way. So there is one of the challenges, I think, in venture is like, how do you maintain a shock absorber to the challenges? So how do you maintain a sense of clarity in those difficult moments? How do you ensure that you don't make the problems worse and that you're able to problem solve with founders with a clear mind? And over time, how do you make sure that you somewhat protect yourself from these very challenging moments? Because to be quite frank, in any fund, you probably have more companies that are going through hard moments than companies that are just completely ripping. We have 30 companies in our portfolio. We will typically have 5, 6 maybe that become huge winners. That means there are 25 companies that will maybe not work out or not work out in the way that you expect. And I think if you internalize that too much and you don't learn to build somewhat of a barrier around that, then I think it's a lot of weight to be taking home every evening. But it's the beauty, I think, of this game that you become emotionally invested in the people that you back.
Especially when you are, as we said earlier, organizing also events that are bringing these people together. Mm-hmm. I noted that you're doing 40 events a year. Mm-hmm. And I know that this is maybe for someone who's not familiar, it sounds like, oh, it's a big number. It's actually far from the biggest number out there. We talk to a lot of communication and marketing executives from the VC industry. Mm-hmm. Running 100 events a year is pretty normal. Can you just quickly tell me what is it that you organize? What is the most important event? Is it the AGM? Is it the founders retreat? Like, what is it that makes sense? I mean, from your perspective,
what do I think is the most important event?
For you.
I think for us, our founder retreat every April is probably the most important event that we run. We run industry events in each vertical. So we have something called, as an example, London Bio, which is a biotech-focused event for our biotech vertical. We host ecosystem events like we're doing at Slush here, and we host portfolio events. Our founder retreat is, I think, our most important portfolio event, and it's where we bring our founders together for 4 days in Portugal, and we don't try to create too much of a business focus of the event. What we try to do is create very, very close friendship bonds between the founders that come. Because one of the things that we've learned is that you want to help people that you like and you feel emotionally invested in. You may help people that there is some kind of transactional relationship with. You might get something back from that. But ultimately you help people with a greater degree of sort of vigor and authenticity if you are friends with them. And that's what we try to create in the founder retreat. And why do I love it? We've had founders that have come to us to say, this event is, third in importance behind my birthday and Christmas. And building a company is so hard. Spending time with people that are also authentic about those challenges and don't just try and say, listen, our company is, performing this way. They're active in problem solving and talk about their problems as well. People feel like they can be themselves. People feel like they can get a lot of stuff off their chest. And so that, I think, is a very important event. And for me, every single year we have these wonderful moments when I look around, I look at the people that we've backed, and I also feel like a deep sense of pride in what we've built as a fund. And we are very bad at celebrating anything at Backed. When we win a deal, we move on to the next thing. When a company raises an amazing round, we celebrate it internally and then just move on to the next thing. And those 4 days with founders give me a moment to take stock and take a step back and say, I'm very proud of the people that we're working with. So for me, that's a very sort of personal, emotional benefit of the event itself.
It's far from being the largest event that you organize.
Yeah.
I would assume that the largest one is the one that you have tonight.
That's right.
So for those who are not familiar, and I'm assuming a majority of the listeners, it's going to be the 8th edition of the Backed Party.
That's right, yeah.
This is the most sort of, like the biggest queues at Slush. I don't think it was always like that. I think, you gain that kind of
respect and the trust over time.
Through time. So how many people are registering or applying to participate to this?
I wish I knew. It's very quickly
thousands.
becomes. Oh, it's in the many thousands, of course.
Yeah.
It quickly becomes oversubscribed within a week of us putting the link online.
Yeah.
Of course, we get many requests throughout the day for people to be released off the wait list, and I'm not often allowed to do that. Claire, our head of marketing, is the only person who's in charge of that. But of course, it actually started off. One of the people that we first worked with was a woman called Jenny, who was a Slush volunteer herself.
Yeah, I think I know her.
And Slush 10 years ago was a very different event to what it is now. It's the most incredible venture event that we think exists in Europe. But the first time we did this, it was Andre and I on the door. We were the bouncers. We were letting people in. It was a nightclub with our friends as DJs. And it's now spiraled into something that we think is an amazing social mixer with, I think one of the better DJ lineups in Europe and many surprises throughout the evening as well.
Alice in Wonderland is the theme.
Yeah. I forgot to bring my costume this time.
Where can founders connect with you? What they should do to get, their first email through?
So founders can connect with us through X. So I'm more active on X.com. Claire always tries to encourage me to do more content. So X, LinkedIn. You can contact us via email as well. I think the most important thing in that email is to describe why you are best in class as a founder to be building that company. And we'll always do our best to get back to people and either give a very quick yes or a very quick no.
Alex, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Wishing you a great party tonight.
I'm looking forward to seeing you there.
We're recording live in Helsinki during Slush 2025. Remember to subscribe to the selected podcast for more conversations from the front lines of European tech and venture capital. See you soon on Sesamers.
See you tonight.